Oh, let the church say amen. Let me thank Jim Michael. He is indeed a brother beloved. Mary Beth Westerfield got me into this. I think she's off somewhere enjoying retirement. Rick Morris and I go back to his days in the Northwest. Certainly appreciate his friendship throughout the years of my ministry with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge one that labored at Disciples Church Extension but has gone on to be with the Lord, the late Reverend Eugene Randall. Reverend Randall helped me when I was pastoring a congregation in Tennessee where the building needed repurposing and reimagining, and we did that, and here I am once again telling the story of Park Manor Christian Church in Chicago, which was founded in the year of grace 1888. The congregation will celebrate 129 years of service to Chicago and the world this year. This is us. This is our story. I want to preface my remarks by telling our story, who we have been and who we are in this church. Park Manor, Chicago, has notable members. It's really remarkable when you think about one church producing three individuals who have served as moderator for the General Board of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Sybil Thomas from 1967 to 1969, Dolores Highball from 1977 to 1979, and Sharice Gillette from 2003 to 2005 have all served in that capacity. This is us. This is the story of Park Manor Christian Church on the south side of Chicago. My three immediate predecessors, Richard Hyatt Davis, Charles H. Webb Sr., and James L. Demas, all served a minimum of 25 years as senior pastor at Park Manor, Chicago. Y'all pray for me. I'm at year 5. Year 5, so y'all pray, right? Pray. Amen. We have national staff. I want to acknowledge and just kind of tell the story, the history of this wonderful congregation. We have two current regional ministers that we claim. Crystal Williams is in Tennessee, and Joan Bell Haynes is the newly minted regional minister and president of the Central Rocky Mountain region. We claim them, they claim us. We've had national staff. Charles H. Webb Jr. directed the Office of Black Church Ministry. Chris Dorsey currently serves as president of HAM, and the current GMP nominee, Teresa Horde Owens, came through Park Manor while she was a student at the University of Chicago Divinity School. This is us. This is our story. This is who we are. This is who God is still yet at work in. We claim two current sitting seminary presidents. Marvin McMickle grew up at Park Manor in Chicago. He's currently the president at Colgate Rochester in New York. And Sharice Gillette serves Lexington Theological Seminary. This is us. This is who God is calling us to be. We have two prolific seminary professors. Claudia Highball is professor and dean of spiritual life at Connecticut College. And my wife, Dr. Stephanie Crowder, is professor of New Testament, and she directs the D-Min and the field placement programs at Chicago Theological Seminary. This is us. This is who God is calling us to be. Our current location at 600 East 73rd Street was built in 1914, and we moved into that location in 1953. The building is historic in that it is, they tell me, a Frank Lloyd Wright building. And so it's historical and impressive for the 1900s, but it proves challenging in 2017 and the 21st century. Frank Lloyd Wright, y'all, I'm told, was a little guy. He was about 5 feet tall and about 100 plus pounds, and he designed parts of that building with people like him in mind. From time to time, I'm moving and caressing through the building, and I'll accidentally bump my head or fall. I fall from time to time and look around and see if anybody's looking, and I have Frank to thank for that. Park Manor purchased this building after surviving the Great Depression from an Anglo congregation, the Lorimor Memorial Baptist Church, once again in 1953. It is a crown jewel But 64 years later, it presents difficult challenges. Difficult challenges. There is no elevator and no way structurally to put an elevator in the building, so handicap accessibility presents trouble for an aging congregation and just members and friends who are physically challenged. This becomes a huge, huge issue, especially when one of our families experiences the valley of the shadow of death. Just last week, June 26th, this is us. Death comes to our congregation, and the stair lift has a mind of its own. A funeral with one stair lift, and there's only one place where one stair lift will work in this historic edifice. We can only have one, and that one did not want to act right on the one day that we needed it to act right. And so trying to take care of a family, trying to take care of members who are physically challenged becomes a challenge. And so we have to think and we have to pray Psalms 23 really hard, because funerals and moving caskets from the ground level up to the sanctuary can be quite challenging, especially during the week, because some of our parishioners are either working people or older, and they may not have the ability or the capacity to help move a casket out of the car and up 2 flights of stairs. February the 3rd, 2014 really comes to mind for me. It was a cold, cold Monday, Rick. I mean, inclement weather, snow and ice on the ground. One of our precious saints who lived to be 90 years young passed away, and he was, like me, a handsome fella, heavy-set fella. And again, y'all, I mean, it's February in Chicago. I mean, it's a weekday funeral. It's cold. It's ice on the ground. And so yours truly was called into duty to help assist the other 6 pallbearers in order to get that body up those 2 flights of stairs. And I realized then, this is us. There are difficult challenges to this sacred space that has meant so much to so many. But this is us. This is us. Like most of our congregations today, we have difficult challenges. For example, I'm going to use this dreaded word, deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance. Anybody ever heard that word before? Deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance has come to mean for me the valley of the shadow of death. There are no green pastures. There's no still waters in dealing with deferred maintenance. I wish I could get an amen right there. I mean, in this bill, it's always something, y'all. It's always something that comes up. And my board chair, Jim, set me down about 2 years ago. I was at the beginning of my 3rd year as pastor, as minister of this congregation. And she said to me, she said, Pastor, you're doing a good job, but this deferred maintenance is going to get us. And we got 10 years, Pastor, maybe less, to find a new sacred space solution to continue at that time was our 127 year of ministry, because if we don't do something, we're not going to be able to handle the upkeep of this Frank Lloyd Wright building. And don't get me wrong, the building, I mean, it's beautiful. It's a valuable asset. It's just not what we need for our long-term stability and survivability. It's kind of like the little old lady. She lives in a 2-story house, 3-story house, and she's raised her family. Now her husband has passed on, and it's just her in the house except on Sundays or during holidays. And she really needs to simplify to find a new sacred space. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Hard to let go. But the longer you stay, the more difficult it is to find the green grass and the still waters. But we really put the shepherd to the test in helping us and leading us to those sacred and peaceful places. But this is us. And so I would imagine that our story is not that much different from a lot of stories in this room today. I'm sure you too. You have notable disciples. You have difficult challenges. You've got some deferred maintenance. Next thing I want to talk about is kind of sensitive to me. I know Janet mentioned it in her remarks, but demonic activity. Demonic activity. One area we have that is quite troubling to me and many is a serious violence issue in Chicago. It's a Chicago problem. It's really an American problem, which makes it a church problem that must be addressed and must be solved. I mean, I have no other word to call it. I mean, it's really demonic. I was invited by one of the Cook County commissioners and Jesse Jackson to participate in a post-July 4th press conference to call on the mayor and other political leaders to be more aggressive in addressing the violence in Chicago. 102 people shot, 15 killed during last weekend. And there are some things that I believe the church and the community can do to address it, but the level of violence that we have requires not just prayer, but it requires public policy, both and, because it is the valley of the shadow of death. It's demonic. I was at a funeral Wednesday, June 28th, never forget it. Young man shot in the back of the head twice, leaving the laundromat at his funeral. Our church, in fact, helped to pay for his funeral. We paid for his funeral. Family didn't have insurance, didn't have the resources. Park Manor wrote the check. We paid for the funeral. But the violence, y'all, is so pervasive, and there is nowhere you can move to get away from it. That's one of the things that we talk about in our congregation, our trustees, our elders, the members of our congregation. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to move. I mean, what? I can move to Wilkes-Barre. I can move to Pittsburgh, but it's there too, right? I can move back to Tennessee. Violence is there too. Seems like violence is a very pervasive part of our society today, and there's really nowhere to go. We've got to stay, and we've got to fight it. We've got to pray it away. We've got to encourage political leadership to pass laws and policies that help curb the violence that we see. And I say that to say that looking at some of the stats in Chicago, 300,000 people that look like me have left Chicago. 300,000 people that look like me have left Chicago and Cook County over the past 15 years, and more are leaving. Now, you couple that with 1 million people that look like me came to Chicago during what is called the Great Migration. The story of the Great Migration is the story of folks that left the South beginning around 1916, 1917 for a better life. You know, we just observed the 100th year anniversary of the Great Migration. Folks got on I-57 north to make a better life, and now we have reverse migration, folks getting on I-57 headed back south. And folks ask me, why would you go to Chicago? Of all places, why would you go there? With all of the challenges, with the death, with this valley of shadow of death, with all of the stuff that's happening there, aging congregation, why would you go to Chicago? And I tell them, I didn't move me, God moved me. And wherever God moves us, I wish I had a witness there, God will provide the way for us. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. You know, a fire person, when he or she sees a building on fire, doesn't run the other way. They run towards the fire to put it out. And that's what Park Manor has done throughout her 129-year ministry and what she continues to do today. Park Manor is a faithful community on the south side of Chicago. And the south side of Chicago and the neighborhood of Park Manor has changed. We have more fires to put out. More fires to put out. It was a middle-class community where folks owned their own homes and raised their families and handled their business. But I would say over the past 10 to 15 years, those folks have started to die, and their children either didn't want the homes or didn't have the skill set to handle the homes. Couple that with the demolition of several Chicago housing projects where people live for generations and now have been given vouchers to move because the city wants the land. And those folks have become our new neighbors. And so a lot of these beautiful homes have fallen into the hands of landlords who rented the properties to those that have spent their entire lives living in projects where they know nothing about keeping up the property. This is us. This is our story. This is what we are dealing with today. And I'm not going to demonize these folks. This is just the new reality the new dynamic that has created what I would call a destabilization on the west and the south sides of Chicago. And so this new dynamic, added with the lack of economic opportunity, poor schools, a difficult job market, food deserts, and high taxes. Man, they tax everything in Chicago. Tax everything. Sugar and soda tax, we got that. Grocery bag tax, they just added that last week. Water tax, property tax, garbage tax, and all of that, it's created this air of hopelessness and despair, and this is the reality that we face, and dare I say, most all churches face. This is us. This is where God has us now. And so I come to Chicago, and I come to Park Manor Christian Church at a different and difficult time, but there is an amazing opportunity to do good and to make a difference and to create green grass and still waters. Park Manor, I would say in the early 2000s, embarked upon the vision of repurposing a former grocery store, huge grocery store. Congregation purchased the store and was planning to move its ministry, repurpose the building, and move its ministry there in the early 2000s. The building burned down, and my predecessor, James L. Demas, passed away, and the 2008 market crashed, and things changed. After that, this is us. In fact, most church experts will tell you, those that study church attendance trends say that after the market crash in 2008, that was the only time that the church in America did not see an increase in attendance or growth. In fact, we lost people. We gained after the Second World War, the unrest of the 60s, the Vietnam, the Gulf War, 9/11. But something happened in 2008. And almost a decade later, the numbers by and large have not recovered. And so we have, Park Manor Christian Church has a city block. We own it, free and clear, but we know that we would need an additional $8 to $10 million to do new construction and pour concrete from the ground up. Now, we don't have any debt, but $8 to $10 million, that's a mountain to climb, and our budget will not allow that. This is us. This is who God has called us to be. We are congregationally governed. So in the coming weeks, we will decide the next steps related to the sale of that property and the purchase of another property, a potential building on the south side of Chicago that can be repurposed so that we can continue to serve and to address the violence and put out the fires and show the grace of God through our outreach ministries. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. This is us. You saw the video. A lot of the children. My ministry is built around ministry to children, ministry to the community, to outreach. We've started in the last 5 years a weekly after-school program. There's an AA program in the building every week. There's a summer leaders program. I met with a group of Southside principals when I moved to Chicago 5 years ago, and they said July is the most violent month in the city's life. And so activities, ministries has to be done in order to bring those numbers down. So we have our summer leaders program, seniors program. We run a full two-week, all-day vacation Bible school, Thanksgiving community meal. Hundreds are fed. Started an honor roll breakfast. When we started that honor roll breakfast, Jim, we had about 15 kids from the Park Manor School that came along with their parents and the faculty and staff. Now we have over 100 that come. Thank God. Thank God for that, the ministries that we're able to provide to the residents of the south side of Chicago. We've added a back-to-school bash. Over 500 people come and participate in that. And then last year, we started a summer concert series entitled Jazz in the Park. We have jazz musicians from Chicago that come. We set out lawn chairs. The neighborhood comes. Over 500 people come and participate in those jazz concerts. And we do this. We do these ministries as an alternative to address the violence, to address the issues of poverty, pervasive violence in our community. Praying those words in the 23rd Psalm, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. I don't know where I am in terms of time. I may be over, but I've provided, there's some questions on the table. I know our leaders are going to handle that there. I wanted to use work with doctoral students, DMin students at Chicago Theological Seminary, and one of the models that we use is Paul Scott Wilson's 4 pages model. Wilson, he asked 4 questions, and I've used the 23rd Psalm as our guide for our time together. And so those questions on the table, I don't know if we're using all of the questions or not, but the first question I'd like for us to consider is, what is the trouble, using the 23rd Psalm, what's the trouble within that psalm, within that scriptural text? What's the trouble there? Second question, what is the trouble in your current ministry location? What's the trouble? What's the tension? What's the controversy in your current ministry location? Third question is, going back to the 23rd Psalm, what is the grace within that psalm? What is the grace within that passage, that pericope of scripture? And then finally, last question, what is the grace in your current ministry location? I invite us to gather at our tables and begin table discussions. And I pray God's blessings, rich blessings upon all of us. Amen.